Let's go inside the drive, brought to you by DirecTV, and as he will all season long here on College Football Playoff Top 25. The chair of the selection committee, Jeff Long, joins us now. So, Jeff, first of all, let's start at the top. Ohio State's #1 in the polls, Clemson's #1 in the selection committee rankings. What was it about the Tigers that set them apart in the judgment of the committee?
Yeah, I think the quality of their victories, and certainly the Notre Dame victory at home, but they have four teams that have better than a 500 record that they've defeated, and that combined with really an offense and a defense that are very strong on both sides of the ball. So I think that's what won the day in the committee's eyes for the #1 ranking.
If you look at efficiency rankings, the Tigers are in the top 5 in the country in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Jeff, which team to the committee was the most difficult to evaluate at this point in the season?
You know, I do think it's Baylor and it's TCU because of their strength of schedule and who they've played thus far. I think those teams, particularly Baylor, has an explosive offense, and we've seen that. But I think the strength of schedule is what's left us uncertain of their true strength.
So when you look at the Big 12 and the entire schedule is backloaded and several of the teams in the Big 12 are ranked and they're all going to play each other over the next month, it seems to me there are more contenders this year than last year in the Big 12. How would you compare the evaluation of the Big 12 this year as opposed to last year when there weren't as many contenders? You were basically looking at two teams.
Well, that's a good question. We really don't compare to last year, though, Reese. But, you know, again, these teams, TCU and Baylor in particular, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma to a lesser degree, but they have their strength of schedule in front of them. So, as you know, we rank to this point in time, and those teams just haven't played their strong teams yet. So we will see how they stack up as we get closer to the end of the season.
What was the biggest point of contention in the committee room?
Oh, I don't know that I could come up with one for overall, but, you know, there was a number of discussions about those undefeated teams and whether a one-loss team should be ranked ahead of them. So we spent a lot of time looking at that, and really, though, it came down to evaluating their resumes, what they've done, who they've beaten, and how they've played in those games.
Among the one-loss teams, Jeff, Alabama's at #4, Florida's at #11. I'm looking at, and I know you guys use a lot of different strength of schedule criteria, and all the individual committee members look at different things. But for most of the metrics, a lot of the strength of schedule, strength of record, things like that are very similar. The common opponent, Ole Miss beat Alabama. Florida took care of Ole Miss. Home game for both Florida and Alabama. Why the discrepancy in the rankings between the Crimson Tide and the Gators?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Reese. I think the fact that Alabama has, you know, a quality victory more than Florida in our eyes. And they've got 3 wins against teams that have 500 or better record, and then Florida has 2. So I think that was probably the biggest difference. I think that they're actually very close, even though they may be separated by that length in our rankings. Those are 2 teams that we do think are very close.
What, Jeff, do you think is the most significant thing in terms of football judgment, people in the room wanting to watch the teams on tape as opposed to looking at their numbers? What was the most influential thing in football judgment?
Well, if I understand your question, I think it's the balance of their team. You know, we have teams that are just one-sided offensive teams or one-sided really strong defensive teams. So that combination of offense and defense, and then, you know, how they've played offensively and defensively in those games. So sometimes that's probably the hardest thing to judge, is some teams that have very explosive offenses, but we haven't seen their defenses tested.
All right, Jeff.